Hey guys, how's it going? So, I'm just kind of taking it easy today. It's another one of my days off here in Japan. I'm not working at Nova today. I'm not doing any sort of training or doing anything like that. I'm just off and taking it easy and chilling, that sort of thing. And I realized that over the last couple of weeks, Yuki and I have been doing a lot of spending time together when she's not working and I was out of work for a little while. And I started picking up like an old habit of mine that I had missed and didn't realize how much I missed, and now I'm like knee deep in this old hobby and I'm loving every second of it. And that hobby is reading. I'm picking up reading again, and this feels so good, and especially good because I've been living in Japan and haven't had access to, like, you know, English books or English literature or that sort of thing. There's the internet, right? But like a firm, solid book, a thick book, I haven't had access to. And part of that's because I lived in Gunma Prefecture, which was far away and didn't have anything like that. I'd have to go to Tokyo to go to buy books. And here in Kobe, there's English bookstores kind of all over the place. And in Osaka, there's a really big one, and that's where I went to get this book. And so, like, I just wanted to kind of crush on some recent books that I've been reading because I really like them, and it feels good to be getting back into it. And my brain feels good for doing it, and I feel healthy whenever I'm doing it. And it's so much nicer, at least recently, to be reading books before bed instead of like watching YouTube videos or like freaking out reading stuff about Facebook or people dying or whatever on the news. So maybe I just want to kind of crush on a couple books I've been reading and looking forward to reading, so maybe I'll get into those real quick. Okay guys, so this is the first book that I picked up. I picked this up in like the small bookstore down in kind of the middle of Kobe. It's called Dune by Frank Herbert. Dune by Frank Herbert. And it's a bit of an older book here, but it's recommended as one of the monuments of modern science fiction. I had never heard of Dune before. I've read other kind of sci-fi science fiction books and stuff like Game of Thrones before, right? So I was never a huge reader. I read more when I was in middle school, but I saw this book and thought, you know, it looked thick. I read the first chapter, if you want to call that of the book, and I really liked kind of what it was introducing. And kind of at a basic level, this book follows like a royal family, and I don't know how to pronounce anyone's names, the Atreides, something like that, and kind of their struggle and their story from going into power and falling out of power and then returning back to power again. And it follows Duke Leto's son Paul as he goes on a bit of a transformative journey through these desert landscapes of Dune, and it's a story of retribution and, you know, kind of avenging your family honor and your family and this sort of thing. And it takes place on kind of this otherworldly cosmic scale with a lot of big battles that take place between certain races or certain like imperial forces and resistance forces, and has this very like Star Wars-y feeling. And in doing some reading, it seems like Dune inspired some of what Star Wars came to be and has had a big influence in some other science fiction books kind of out and around in the literary world. And so I chewed through that book in maybe 5 or 6 days. Maybe if you guys have read this, you guys can let me know down in the comment section. I'd super highly recommend this book. It gets really deep into kind of mysticism of this world, the world they live on, Dune or Rakeen, in the book. It's kind of steeped in like this pseudo-Islamic, pseudo-Christian kind of mythos that the family finds themselves kind of pulled into, and so it gets very like heady and very brainy. It makes you think and consider things from a different perspective. I think it's got a really interesting take on how you might think about life and how you might treat certain people around you and that sort of thing. So it's got a really interesting take on it like that, and I don't want to get too into it because I don't want to spoil anything for you guys. But if you like it, you know, consider checking it out. I'll leave a description to like the Wikipedia page or Amazon page or whatever, so you guys can click on it if you want to just look at it some more. And I also bought the next book in the series, Dune Messiah, which is the follow-up to the main Dune book, which I'm reading now. So if you guys are reading Dune or have read Dune in the past or are thinking about it, let me know what you think about it, because I'd love to talk about Dune. Or just what your thoughts are on the series as a whole. Please don't spoil anything for me going forward, because I really want to keep reading this. And then the other book that I finished recently was A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms by George R.R. Martin. It's like a prequel book to the Game of Thrones series that he's so well known for, A Song of Ice and Fire. And in picking this book up, I was a little bit skeptical because I didn't know what to expect. It doesn't follow the main storyline of the original series or any of the characters from the original series. It's set 100 years in the past, right? So like Samurai Jack kind of thing, like Back to the Past Samurai Jack, if you know what I'm talking about.
Got to get back. Back to the past. Samurai Jack.
Yeah, and the book is kind of a collection of 3 different shorter stories, and it follows the exploits of a hedge knight named Dunk and his squire Egg as they kind of travel around Westeros, the kingdom, doing various, brave things and exciting things here and there. And more than anything, I think this book is just to kind of flesh out the world more, to go to places in the story, in the main series, that you don't get to see in the main series, like the Vale. You don't really get to see the Vale very much. And they spend more time there kind of fleshing out those territories and those ideas, and you meet characters from the past that you've heard of in the original series, but, they're all dead by that time. So you get a bit of a sense of who these people are, what they're about, and what the shape of Westeros was like 100 years ago, which is interesting. The book says right on the back that it's, the time when Dany from the main show, when her family was still around before they were all taken out in the war that happened before Game of Thrones, right? That sets up the whole world. So yeah, so reading this book, it's a bit more of a simple story. It's still fun and it has its exciting moments. Not nearly as in-depth as far as world building, as character building goes. It's more of like these kind of fun short stories you can read in an evening if you have 2 or 3 hours to read. And they keep you engrossed in the land of Westeros while you're just waiting for the next book to come out. I personally don't watch the show, as I've watched the first season of the show and some episodes here and there of the other stuff, but my understanding is that the show is diverging from the book. I don't know how interested I am in that. But yeah, so I would recommend this if you're just looking for something to hold you over for the next book to come out, and you need some Game of Thrones in your life. This is not a bad read. Give it a chance. It's not too expensive either, so maybe give it a chance. Some other books that I have that I want to get into would be some Stephen King. I've read Stephen King books in the past, like Cujo, The Eye of the Dragon, some other ones. Not any of his too famous works like Pet Sematary or anything, but I've read some of his other books in the past. I really enjoyed them, and in doing so much reading of like Dune and then also reading Game of Thrones again a little bit, I'm thinking what are some other big series I can get into, and his Dark Tower series comes up highly recommended all over the internet, and so I picked up his first Dark series book, or his Dark Tower book, called The Gunslinger, which also I think was a movie that got released recently in America. I didn't even know it was going to be a movie until I bought the book and looked it up on the internet. So maybe I'll watch the movie at some point. But the book is supposed to be like a pretty long running series of books, like with 12 or 13 installations here, that are kind of, my understanding is that they it's a bit, he's chasing a certain character that's a reoccurring character within other books in this series, the primary antagonist of the Dark Tower series, and that as he progresses through levels of the Dark Tower, or something to this effect, like we will revisit other books that he's written, or at least we'll take ideas or worlds or characters from those other books and put it into the Dark Tower series. And there's also some interesting stuff about, like, I guess, time and the relationship with time and what it all means. So it sounds really interesting and I want to get into it. And the other book that I picked up was a Stephen King book called The Stand, which I have not read, but my dad has recommended to me many times. Yuki wants to read it. I want to give it a read. It's got that kind of post-apocalyptic thing, and it says about the Dark Tower series that this is this book has a pretty deep relationship with this book, and so in reading this, maybe I'll understand this series better too, even though it's quite thick, almost as thick as my skull is. So those are some books I'm trying to get into. Yuki's bought some other books too from the bookstores we went to that I might read in the future. Some interesting books, so she decided to pick up some more fantasy stuff. And a book about the Underground Railroad, because she's kind of interested in that time period in America, kind of older 1800s, 1700s American history. She thinks that's an interesting part of time because Japan didn't have really a period of time quite as brutal as that. And also some other ones as well. So I've got a lot of reading material, and I just want to go out there and buy even more books. I find myself looking on Amazon and reading book reviews a lot recently. So if you have anything that you'd recommend me read, please recommend it down in the comments below. I'd love to get your guys' take on what's some good books. And if you think that these series of books are good, or you've read Dune or this other Game of Thrones book that I mentioned, maybe you guys can, let me know what you think of them, or maybe pick them up and read them yourselves. So anyway, guys, if you liked the video, give the video a thumbs up. Maybe subscribe if you haven't done so already. And I'll see you guys real soon in the next video. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye. See ya.